Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Tricycle's online practice session. I'm James Shaheen, I'm Tricycle's editor and publisher. Our guest today is Mark Epstein. Mark is a psychiatrist and longtime Buddhist practitioner who has written extensively about the intersection between Buddhism and psychotherapy. He is well suited to this situation, as you'll note from the titles of his best-selling books: Going to Pieces Without Falling Apart, The Trauma of Everyday Life, and his latest book, Advice Not Given, A Guide to Getting Over Yourself, which is available in ebook or audiobook format, read by Mark himself. I know the bookstores are closed right now, but you can still get this book online. We're on a Zoom webinar today, so participant audio and video are off. We are recording this session for anyone unable to attend live. You can review earlier recordings as well as this one as the schedule for upcoming sessions at tricycle.org/live. To make a donation to support these free offerings, you can go to tricycle.org/donate. Mark will begin by sharing his thoughts on life in the pandemic and then lead a guided meditation. I'll then ask a few questions, after which we'll take questions from our listeners. You can post your questions in the Q&A panel accessible through the button below the video screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can before the end of today's session, which goes for about an hour. So thank you, Mark, for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you, James, and hello to everybody. And let me say first how much I love Tricycle. I've been involved with Tricycle since the very beginning. I always read it. I'm so happy that James invited me to participate in this, and I'll do my best to try to communicate something. For those of you who don't know me, don't know my work at all, the first thing for me to say is that I was lucky enough to find Buddhism and to find meditation when I was still, 20 years old, 21 years old. And I dove as deep as I could go into Vipassana, into mindfulness, into studying Buddhist psychology and philosophy. Met Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield and Ram Dass and Sharon Salzberg in my 20s, and became friends with them as well as their student. And after about 7 years of following them around, I decided to go to medical school with the idea of becoming a psychiatrist, which I proceeded to do. And since then, I've been working as a therapist, mostly writing some books, trying to integrate Buddhist thought with what I've learned from Western psychotherapy. So that's just a little background. In terms of now, which is a very strange, difficult for many people, a bardo or a limbo time, in kind of intermediate state between what was before and what will be, but we don't know what that is. I was supposed to go on retreat at the Insight Meditation Society. They have a little part of the meditation retreat center called the Forest Refuge, where people can go if they know what they're doing and won't go crazy just being alone with themselves all the time. I was supposed to go there on March the 12th. And I've been trying to go every year for a week on a silent retreat for myself. And a couple of days before, I realized I wasn't going to be able to go because of the virus was descending upon us, and I canceled the retreat. And then found that the retreat center itself had to close a couple of days later, so I felt less bad about having to give up my long sought retreat. But what I found instead is that instead of me going alone to be on my own individual retreat, that the whole world is now on retreat, everybody in their own way. And there are a few things that I've learned over the years trying to do these silent retreats for myself every year that might be helpful to try to communicate, because while we're all in our own little spaces, some of us alone, very alone, some of us with families, with small children, with our significant others, or our parents, whatever it may be, we're all in our little pods. And it often is not easy. There are some people, I think, who are actually enjoying this and using it creatively, or doing their own silent retreats. And many of those people, some of whom I'm talking to still on the phone as their therapist, many of those people are guilty about actually enjoying this time and seeing how much suffering there is as a result of the virus. But for most people, it's very difficult. And I think there are some strategies that we've learned from being on these retreats that might be helpful to people that I'd like to try to talk about before I jump into the meditation that I want to do. When I go on a silent retreat, my joke to myself is that there's no time to meditate on the retreats, because by the time you get up, do your morning ablutions, take a nice long walk as the sun is rising, eat breakfast, do the dishes, do your job, vacuum, sweep, clean a little bit, stretch the body, do your exercises. It's time for lunch already. So, and then after lunch, maybe a little walk, maybe a nap, a few more exercises. Maybe there's an hour there to meditate in. But the thing about being on these retreats is that every one of those activities, the walk, the sweeping, the brushing the teeth, the eating, all of those activities can be done mindfully. All of those activities are opportunities to be with your own experience the way we have learned to try to be in meditation. So for those of us who are trying to figure out how to structure our time in these endless days that run together, creating a routine for yourself, including moving the body, and trying to dwell within the body when you're moving the body, taking a walk if you're lucky enough to be able to go outside, or if you're in a city apartment, even just walking back and forth in a room the way we do in walking meditation, where you make the effort to rest the mind in the body as the body is doing whatever it does. Even that is a meditation. And the same goes for eating, that when you have your food, I always like reading when I'm eating my food, so I consider reading and eating a meditation itself also. But it's very helpful just to focus the mind on the actual physical sensations of moving the food to the mouth, chewing the food, swallowing the food, tasting the food. And once you do that, even eating a small meal takes about 45 minutes. So you've gotten through that much of the day. So setting up a routine for yourself, allowing the domestic tasks which are taking up most of people's days, the cooking and cleaning and caring for one's children or oneself or each other, allowing those things to be part of our meditation and doing them mindfully, to use an overused word, really helps to make the time feel like it's worth something. And then, should you have any time to really meditate in the classic way of sitting and doing nothing, you know, you can never go wrong with doing nothing. And meditating is really about doing nothing. It's really about seeing how much that effortful thing that where we're trying to get somewhere, even in our meditation, is getting in the way of the meditation. So to be able to sit really with the idea of backing away from any agenda that you might have for yourself and just allowing the world to come to you is my big suggestion for an adjustment that one could make if one has a meditation practice. So maybe I'll stop there in terms of my introductory remarks, see if James wants to say anything, and if not, I'll begin the meditation. James doesn't seem to want to say anything, so the meditation that I want to lead is inspired by teachings that I've done over the years with Sharon Salzberg and Professor Robert Thurman, professor of Tibetan studies at Columbia University. And sometimes just Thurman and I, and sometimes the three of us teach together at Tibet House in New York City, at a Menla Retreat Center, which is in Phoenicia, New York, upstate near the Catskills. And when we teach together, I always ask Professor Thurman to begin with a kind of elaborate meditation / visualization in which he opens what he calls the Buddha field that we're all dwelling under when we're meditating together and learning about the Buddha's teachings. So I've heard him do that probably, for the past 25 years whenever we're teaching together. And finally, it started to seep into me a little bit. I'm terrible at visualizing, so I can't really see anything when I'm visualizing. I have to only think that I'm seeing it. But I thought what I would do today is to lead you all in my version of this visualization meditation that I learned from Bob. So without too much more ado, I would invite you to make yourself comfortable. Assume a meditative posture, which usually means sitting up straight, propping yourself up as much as you need to with whatever kinds of cushions, blankets, pillows, blocks, supports. But remember, you can do meditation in a standing position, a lying position, a walking position, or sitting. So find a comfortable position, back straight. Close your eyes. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can do it open. If you want to stare at the screen, it's fine. But we're going to do a visualization, so with your eyes closed, it might be more comfortable. And start by just feeling your body. Feel your feet, your legs, thighs, your abdomen, your chest, your hands, your arms, your shoulders, your back, if you can feel your back. It's taken me years to be able to feel my back. Try to feel your back, your neck. Relax the tension in your face. Feel yourself into your brain, the back of your brain, the back of your head. Allow your body just to rest in whatever position you've put it in. Feel the places of contact with the chair, with the floor, with the earth, the gravity holding your body. Settle the body. Let it be supported. Feel the support. And next, bring your attention to the visual, even if your eyes are closed. Have a sense of whether you're seeing light or dark. See how spacious, how empty, how open the visual field is with your eyes closed. And allow that empty, open, spacious, light, dark panorama to fill your mind. Then open up the mental space, the space where thoughts occur. Thoughts may be passing through your mind, but see that the mind itself is vast space in which the thoughts sometimes percolate. Feel the feeling, the space of the mind, and rest the mind in the body as the body rests on the cushion. Let the mental energy drip down like you're pouring water, boiling water through the coffee grounds and the coffee's dripping into the pot. Let your mental energy drip down, resting the mind in the body, the same way the body rests on the cushion. Then in that mental space, the space of imagination, an infinite space in which the mind can travel, imagine yourself on a bluff, on a knoll, in a dell, sitting up high, looking out at the ocean below you, or at the fields or rolling hills below. Imagine yourself sitting up high, looking out, the sun shining, a warm breeze blowing, and behind you, offering shade, a huge benevolent tree rising up. You could be leaning against the tree if you want, or just sitting underneath it. Beautiful tree, sucking up the carbon dioxide, giving off oxygen. And in the tree, imagine there are benefactor figures, benevolent figures, spirit guides even, mentors from your own life, teachers, therapists, spiritual teachers, or people you've only heard about who've inspired you. Jesus, Buddha, Mary, Joseph Campbell, Freud, people who have helped you in this life even. I think sometimes of my 5th grade teacher, Miss Buemi, who cried when John F. Kennedy was shot. But any figures like that, teachers, therapists, coaches, babysitters who might have seen something special in you. And they're looking down at you, so delighted to see you there. You've taken to meditation. You're shining there. You're in your meditative body, in your mind, imagining yourself there under the tree, staring out. Your body is becoming light. You've taken to meditation. You're letting go of your tensions, your defenses, your fears, even your ambition. You're allowing those all to settle down into the body, into the earth. And what's left there is just your meditative body, your clear light body. You're embracing your true nature there, and those benevolent figures are looking down at you, sending you their blessings. They're so happy to see you embracing your true nature, wise, loving, shining, and bright, all your doubts flowing out of you into the earth below. Those beings are so happy with you. They're beaming light down at you. They're beaming love, rainbow jewels, warm energy down to you. Their energy is filling your body, entering through your brain, percolating down to your heart, through that vast space of imagination and filtering down into your body. And as you're feeling all that good energy coming to you, you realize that you yourself are a source of blessings, and you look out in front of you, and in front of you, beneath you, there are, in this visualization, 3 computer screens, 3 Zoom gatherings. The one on the left, the first one that you look at, are filled with, in gallery view, all the people who you love, the people who you love so much. They see you shining, and you see them, and you pour that love and light that's coming down to you from the beings in the tree. You pour that love out of your heart to those people who you love so much, wishing them well. May they be healthy. May they be happy. May they be free. And in the center screen, in the center Zoom gathering, are all the so-called neutral people. The postman, the grocery worker, the UPS guy, the person who finally picks up the phone when you call the cable company, the bank teller. Only these neutral people are not neutral anymore. These are the people that are keeping our lives going now. These are the people we've taken for granted who now we need so much. And they see you seeing them, and they're happy to be recognized. And they're happy to see you shining there. And you send your love, your light, your clear light energy to them also. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be free. On the right-hand side, in the third computer screen, are the people you don't like, the people you can't stand, your enemies, maybe your exes who you used to love, who now you hate. They're all there. The people who annoy you, the joggers who are running by without masks, who you're shying away from. But those people are there. And not only them, but the people like Mitch McConnell, and Stephen Miller, Mike Pence, William Barr, they're all there looking at you, and they're surprised. They see you. They didn't like you either, but they see you there shining. You catch their eye. You caught their attention, and in that moment, even those people, you send them that good energy that you're made of. You send them love. May they be healthy. May they be happy. May they be free. Now, in that meditative space that you're in, which is a space of insight and love, there's time for reflection. So before we stop the meditation, I'm going to give you 4 little Buddhist reflections. So in the first one, you reflect on your own uniqueness, on your own precious human birth. Here you are in your meditative body. It's incredible. You've taken this form and you're able to do this with your mind. What an opportunity this is. Do not diminish it. In the second reflection, you think about impermanence. The Buddha's primary teaching, everything that is born will die. There's nothing special about that. Be willing to acknowledge it. Virus or no virus, we're all going to die when we don't know when. Which just makes this all the more precious, this opportunity, this very moment of meditation. So your own uniqueness, but all of our impermanence. Third, try to summon, just for the moment, any familiar feeling of unworthiness, of failure, of lack, of self-loathing, of low self-esteem, ways you don't like yourself, chronic things you say to yourself about what's wrong with you. Try to bring that up into your imagination and then let it dissolve. Simply thoughts, empty of any true nature. Stories you've been telling yourself that limit what you're capable of. Maybe you're wrong about those things. Maybe you're wrong. You could be your own therapist for this one moment. Fourth, and finally, reflect on the suffering of the unenlightened life when you see yourself as isolated, separate, all alone, struggling with the universe, trying to get your needs met, you up against the vast universe that's opposing you. That's the unenlightened view, which makes you paranoid, anxious, and depressed. Feel yourself instead in your meditative body, in your light body, embracing the entire world. Connected, not alone, even as we're all alone in our own little environments, trying to keep ourselves safe. And then for a moment, just rest in your meditative body, your meditative mind, your meditative state, your meditative light. Feel what a gift it is to have this kind of awareness, the ability to be with one's own mind, to have a mind, to be able to watch one's mind, dwell in one's mind's true nature. And then, since it's almost time to stop, we close the Buddha field by saying goodbye to the 3 Zoom meetings in front of you, all those people, the ones you love, the so-called neutral people who we all need, and the ones you can't stand. Say goodbye to them and to the figures above you, their blessings, their delight in you. Thank you to the spirits above. And then when you're ready, open your eyes and we can rejoin our momentary interconnectedness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I just like to remind our listeners that they can ask questions too. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. But first, Mark, I especially appreciated the meditation and the 4 reflections. Those are very helpful, especially now. But you said something that I also found very helpful. You referred to this moment as a bardo, an in-between place.
Yeah.
I find myself and many others are so filled with uncertainty about what's to come rather than curiosity. Of course, I'm not sick right now, and many are, and I understand that so many are experiencing such difficult times. But for those of us who are healthy right now, how might we look at this uncertainty? The old world is gone, the new one has yet to be born, and here we are.
Well, the word uncertainty, I think, holds the key there, James. And I think in terms of this being an actual bardo, that the first thing is it really is practice. It really is practice for dying. Because if we can believe the Buddha's teachings, that life doesn't just go blank when we die, then there really might be a bardo that we're all going to enter into. And believe me, we're not going to know what's coming next when we're in that space. I was reminded of this wonderful George Saunders book called Lincoln and the Bardo, which was a novel that he wrote a couple of years ago, where it took me a while when I was reading the book. The people who die in the book and go into the bardo don't know that they're dead. So they, they're in the bardo, but they don't know where they are. It's very confusing. And I think that made a big impression on me because we don't even know now where we are. We're in this bardo, but what is this? We're not only uncertain about what's coming next, we're uncertain about what's the purpose of now, and who are we now? We know who we used to be, and everyone wants to get back to who they were before, but it's not going to be like that. So the Buddha's teaching was, oh, that's true actually every moment, every day. And, no one knows when they're going to die. No one knows what trauma is going to come upon them, the car accident or the earthquake or the cancer diagnosis. But what's unique about now is that the whole world is in it together. So that's like a fairy tale moment, where someone put a curse on the whole world and everything stopped. So it's a real opportunity to experience the truth of uncertainty and to look to see what kind of faith we have in our own minds to be able to navigate that uncertainty. Good luck to us all.
Yeah, I'll ask one more question before
Go
I go.
ahead.
I'll go to ask one more question before we go to our listeners. Either we find ourselves entirely alone in lockdown, or we find ourselves with people that we're spending far more time with than we're used to, usually family members, spouse, and so forth. And I often think that in my meditation practice, learning to be with myself made it much easier to be with others. Yet these two things, being with oneself and being with one others, we're in a bit of a pressure cooker now. And as a psychiatrist, you must really be in demand right now. Can you say something about being with oneself in a way that we're not used to? I mean, it's a sort of a forced situation, or being with others when we're desperate to have time to ourselves. I mean, those two poles seem to be conflicting everything.
Yeah, I could try to talk about that. When the Buddha in his Four Noble Truths, when he gives the definition of suffering, it's like he lists it: old age, illness, death, but then separation from the loved, and being united with, being too close to people that you don't love. Those are the next things that come, which is what your question makes me think of. Too much time by ourselves is the separation from the loved. Like, where are those people we need? And it's only me here with like NPR or something, and then being locked up with, even with people who you do love, but who you start to get on your nerves, because the thing about intimate relationships is that it brings out the hate as well as the love. And love and hate, we know from the therapy world, actually are intimately connected. And when people are pushing away the anger, pushing away the hate, pushing away the rage in their children or for their children, or in their lovers or for their lovers, then you start to adopt this sort of fake, rigid, tense persona, because you're denying your actual feelings. But on the other hand, if you indulge the feelings too much, then you're heading for divorce or worse. So being able to manage the intensity of one's own emotional states, that I think that's a place where meditation and therapy together have really made a difference for me. Not to repress, not to push away, but also not to indulge. Is a very tricky thing. But it's doable. And I think this time where so many of us are either feeling too alone with ourselves or too locked up with people that we need some space from, it's a real opportunity to look more honestly, more forthrightly and more humbly, I think, at what our emotional bodies, what we're made of emotionally. And I think people, I've heard, and I know it's true for me, people are dreaming like crazy during this time. And I think which is sort of interesting, but I think it's another way that if we want to think about it as the deeper levels of the psyche are trying to make themselves known, stuff that you could be pushing away in your regular life with the busyness of a regular life. There's no way to push it all away now, even no matter how many shows you're binging on, on TV. It's still going to come. And I think it's a real opportunity. I think there's a lot to be learned from those dreams. And even the difficulties, the struggles of getting through week by week, month by month, finding the groceries and changing the sheets and everything. It's endless and repetitive.
Great. So I'm going to ask you a listener's question. It's related. It says, how do you balance being okay with being by yourself and being isolated from others? In other words, enjoying, I guess, being with oneself and then without slipping into isolation. How do you find a balance there?
Well, I think this is the time for slipping into isolation. So that's what I was saying at the beginning. It's sort of a retreat for a lot of people. And people have a lot of fears about isolation, but isolation can be very rich internally if one makes room for what the experience really is. I think there's such a drive in most people to interact and to be with others and to give and receive emotionally with other people, that I don't think you have to worry about slipping too much, going into an alone state that you won't be able to get out of. I think in 2 seconds you'll be out of it if once given the opportunity, but not to feel that it's a waste to be with oneself. There's a lot it'll make you a better person if you make room for what the experience actually is. And if you're lucky enough to be anywhere near nature, even if you have a window that looks out at a tree, pay attention, because then the natural world is still talking to us. And ordinarily, when we're too busy, we miss a lot of it. So,
Okay, thank you, Mark. I'm going to ask a question that a few people have asked. Kimberly Foster, who describes herself as a new Buddhist, says, I'm not doing well because I don't feel I want to bestow love on Bill Barr at all. How do I do better?
That's okay. I don't really either, but somewhere within Bill Barr is a soul yearning to be free. So it's only on that soul that we're sending love, so that maybe he'll have a dream that will move him. But that kind of question, that's like for a new meditator who imagines meditation as, a quiet mind, a silent mind, one without thoughts, and then who finds oneself thinking all the time. That same kind of question arises. I think I'm having trouble. I'm a bad meditator because I can't stop thinking, kind of thing. Or I'm a bad meditator because I'm trying to do loving kindness meditation, but all I can think about are the people that I can't stand. That's normal. That's what you're supposed to be seeing when you're meditating, where the point is not to become thoughtless. The point is not to eradicate thought. Thoughts, the thinking mind is with us always. The point is not to be completely seduced by one's thoughts and to go more into the awareness of whatever is happening rather than being swept up by the content of it. So it's the cultivation of the awareness. So if you, the questioner, are seeing that I cannot summon a loving thoughts for Bill Barr, great, you're observing your own thoughts, and it's that observation that we're building on in meditation.
Okay, this is from Jennifer Woodhull, and maybe this will bring your own background into with Buddhism and psychotherapy to the fore. She writes, I recognize the 4 reminders you took us through, but I'm curious about the third, traditionally, the inescapability of karma. You seem to replace that with an awareness of our habits of self-denigration. Can you explain how your approach reflects the traditional reminder of karma?
You have a better understanding of the traditional form than I do. I'm not really aware that the third one was about karma. I was picking up on having heard Thurman run through those on various occasions. So that third thing about being aware, summoning all the ways, all the stories that you tell yourself about how you're less than, maybe that does have something to do with karma, in that we take too much stock, we put too much stock in our own developmental experiences, and because we're all a little bit self-centered, when we're growing up and difficult things happen even in our family life, our mother is drinking or our parents are fighting or whatever's going on, we tend to, as children, take responsibility for things that have nothing to do with us. I'm watching this TV show on Hulu called Normal People, where the main character feels bad about her body, bad about herself. She's being ostracized in school because she's a little weird. So we take that experience and we build our identities around those random things that happen to us that have very little to do with who we actually are in our hearts, in our souls, in our true natures, So you could think of that as the accrual of karma or conditioning. But I'm thinking about it more from a psychological perspective, the ways that people over-identify with their negativity that then obscures their real potential.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Someone writes, Charles E. J. writes, as a physician, how does your knowledge of anatomy and physiology inform your practice of meditation, or does it? And how can that knowledge be used to help persons in the medical profession in their meditation practice?
I would say my knowledge of anatomy and physiology is 30 years gone from medical school, and that I've reclaimed a little bit of it through doing yoga. As I was saying at the beginning, it's taken me years to be able to feel my shoulder blades and my back, but so much of my emotional body is actually located in the places of tension that I cannot feel in my physical body. So as a psychiatrist and a therapist, that's interesting to me. The how much of our emotional life is actually lodged in the body and can be released through not just through meditation, but through all kinds of physical activity. Um, but I think more to the point, through my training, because I did go to medical school and I am a psychiatrist, which gives me license to prescribe medicine, antidepressants and anti-anxiety medicines and so on. And that's given me a certain window into anxiety and depression, even in very experienced spiritual practitioners and teachers, because people have trusted me enough in the Buddhist world, in the spiritual world, to come to me privately and are willing to admit that meditation has not cured them of all of their emotional issues, that depression can still come in a highly realized, highly accomplished meditator, that people can still be anxious even when they've learned how to quiet their minds, so that there's more going on than trying to make meditation a one-stop, one-shop fits all treatment, for every emotional illness is an overuse of meditation. It's asking it to do too much, and I feel like that's something I've been able to communicate in a helpful way to certain people, which has allowed them to use meditation for what it's good for, but not feel betrayed by it, for not being able to solve every problem.
Okay, Sarah writes, it seems to affect, it says, let me see. Mm-hmm. Someone asks about the chemical changes of isolation that occur within one. It seems to affect the capacity to hold all kinds of challenges. So that's why I wonder if there's an actual chemical change that occurs with isolation.
I think there can be chemical changes. In people who are prone to, as I was saying before, anxiety or depression, various other kinds of emotional illnesses, that it's worth paying attention to how the insidious nature of those kinds of states. And if one is too alone and beginning to drift into a territory that's too uncomfortable, there's a lot of therapeutic help out there, not just in the Buddhist world or through Tricycle or in the spiritual world, but through one's physicians, through one's therapists. And it's important to be able to reach out and get help. Similar things happen, people who are drinking too much or smoking too much pot or doing too many drugs in their isolation, or even eating too much or not eating enough. There are all kinds of ways that people can drift slowly into states in which chemically their minds are not going to be in the best kind of shape. And so there's a lot of vulnerable people out there, and there's a lot of help for them.
Okay, Mark, this one is from a fellow psychotherapist. Uh-huh. I have been a psychotherapist for 30 years and started a meditation practice, Zen meditation, for the past 5 years. But since this pandemic, reading and listening more to Stephen Batchelor, a friend of yours, more secular folks and John Kabat-Zinn and other insight folks, I'm trying to see how to bring more of these mindfulness and meditation practices into my work. I talk about my own path with clients, but curious whether it's important to actually train as a mindfulness practitioner or just how you would or do you use these practices in your work?
I've gone back and forth on this for more than 30 years. At first, wanting to introduce people, to mindfulness as part of the therapy, and then realizing that that really wasn't what people were coming to me for, that they needed me just to be their therapist, and not lay any particular trip on them about Buddhism or meditation or mindfulness or anything. So I backed way away. And just cultivated myself as thinking that if this meditation was doing anything for me, it should come through in some way, maybe in the way I listened or the way I related, and that worked pretty well until sometime 5-6 years ago, when I started to get the idea to write the book that's called Advice Not Given. And the subtitle's A Guide to Getting Over Yourself. But I realized, and it was after having a pivotal conversation with my father, who was a physician, not interested in anything spiritual, a real scientific materialist. But my father came down with a brain tumor that was on the non-dominant side of his brain. So cognitively, he was fine. But he got lost driving home from work one day, the same route he'd taken for 30 years. And that's when the brain tumor was discovered. And it was too late to do anything. So he knew he was going to die. I knew he was going to die. But he was still going to the hospital and being a doctor and working in the lab and so on. He was in his 80s. But I realized I had never had any conversation with him about Buddhism and about meditation and about what might happen when he died, if we believe in the bardo and so on. So I called him on the phone and had one conversation where I said, I don't know if you're interested, but this is what maybe this is what they say and what I sort of believe, but we've never really talked about it. And he's like, yeah, sure, tell me. And I tried to find language that wasn't Buddhist, but to communicate something that I hope is true and think is true. And I said something like, that feeling inside you where you are who you've always been, when you're 20 years old or 40 or 60 or 80, when you close your eyes, like we did in the meditation, when you close your eyes, you're just you, but you could be any age. Like, it doesn't change that much, which is sort of strange about being in my 60s now. It's definitely doesn't change that much. I still think I'm in my 30s. He said, yes, he got that. I said, well, the Buddhists seem to say that if you can relax your mind into that space, which is almost like a sort of transparent place within you, but still you're you, if you can relax your mind into that space, you can kind of ride that out when you die. As the body falls away, that's still there. And that can take you out. And he's like, okay, darling, I'll try. And that was like one of the last conversations I had with him, but it felt good. And it was after that I was on retreat at the Forest Refuge, and I was sitting in my room on my cushion, and I started to think about that conversation and about how maybe that all this Buddhist stuff, I was holding it back a little too much from my patients too, the way I had been holding it back from my father, and that maybe I should start to talk about it a little bit more. And that led to the writing of the book, which is structured around the Buddha's Eightfold Path, his fourth noble truth. So, which isn't just about meditation, it's about how to implement meditation, a meditative sensibility into one's life. So that freed me up a little bit to, when appropriate, try to find what the dharmic element, what the Buddhist element, what the meditative element might be in the conversations with my patients. And I've been interested in that ever since. And I think there's some way, I'm trying to write about this now, actually, in a new book. I think there's some way that I'm most interested in when a bit of humor or something really unexpected, when there can be just in the conversation. So not so much teaching someone to meditate or meditating together or anything, but when a moment can happen in the conversation that's unsettling enough in a helpful way, where someone makes someone question, like what we were doing in that reflection, their unworthiness, some way they've always thought of themselves as not good enough. If I can shake that in some way that comes out of the relationship, I feel like I'm opening up the same place that a good long retreat might open up for someone, where they're less sure about everything they knew and more open and vulnerable and in touch with the love that's in them, I would say. So that's a non-answer to the question, but it's what the question evoked in me.
Yeah, my copy, believe it or not, I'm in the middle of a move. Moving is considered an essential service, and my copy of Advice Not Given is in a box. Now I want to order the audio version.
Oh, good.
But I always love the subtitle, A Guide to Getting Over Yourself. Can you just say something quickly about that before I ask another question from our listeners?
Yeah, sure. It wasn't going to be the subtitle. I didn't know what the title is always a big problem, and the titles are important to me. So I knew the main title was going to be Advice Not Given. And I was playing around with, other terrible subtitles that I can't remember. And suddenly, A Guide to Getting Over Yourself. I think I was thinking about The Lonely Planet, like a travel guide or something. And the Eightfold Path as a kind of guide to subverting the ego. So I ended up talking a lot about the ego from a Western point of view. Like, how much do we really need the ego, and how much is it getting in our way? And we need it for some things, to navigate in the world and to be the person we want to be, etc. But if we're too attached to the ego is all about being in control and trying to make uncertainty not a reality. That's the ego's main agenda. And so it's a Sisyphean task, ultimately it's going to fail because if we're not suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, we're suffering from pre-traumatic stress disorder because we know it's going to come, So the Buddha's path is get it out of the way as much as possible, because you can function better without it. Give it its due, but don't make it do more than it's capable of. So that was the idea. The phrase just came in a moment, and I knew, I wrote right away to my editor and said, "Do you like it?" And she's like, "Yes." So that was it.
So since you did also write The Trauma of Everyday Life, I'll ask you a question that Danielle sends in. She writes, I feel like many people in my life are attempting to minimize the trauma and impact this is having on our lives and live in distractions. Do you feel from a therapy point of view that we need to first accept that we are in a collective traumatic state to treat it individually? How would you recommend we deal with the trauma of feeling unsafe and not knowing?
Yeah. Well, I would say yes, I do think so. When the Buddha taught his Four Noble Truths, the first truth is that he just said one word, and the word he said was dukkha. And dukkha is generally translated as suffering, but that's a kind of poor English translation. If you take the word apart, what it actually means is is difficult, and ka is face. So what the Buddha is saying is that there's an element to life that's difficult to face, that's hard to face. He didn't have a word for trauma, but he used this word dukkha. Its counterpart is sukha, which is sweet to face. So he didn't deny that there's a lot that's sweet to face in life, but he said there's this traumatic undercurrent, And our tendency is to look away from it. That's the thing about the ego. The ego doesn't want to see it. The ego's job is to keep us together, And trauma, the Western definition of trauma is that an event happens that creates an emotional response that's too difficult for the ego to handle. Like when someone's killed in front of you, or when you're when you're scared for your own life. Those are the big T traumas. So the emotional responses feels too much like it's gonna tear us apart. So the ego says, no, I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to keep myself together no matter what. I'm going to banish those feelings, put them away. And that's where post-traumatic stress comes from, because there's nowhere to put the feelings other than in the body or in the unconscious, if you can use that kind of language. But they won't stay there. So then you have bad dreams, or you go past the place where the accident was, or there's a reminder, and the feelings come rushing out, but you still can't handle them, So the Buddha's therapy was train yourself, teach yourself how to be with the unpleasant, not just with the pleasant, allow yourself to look at the uncertainty, allow yourself to look at impermanence, allow yourself to look at insubstantiality, allow yourself to look at death. Don't shy away from the truth of illness, So yes, I would say it's quite natural. Nobody wants this to be happening. Who wants a virus stopping the world? Who wants to be afraid to go to the grocery store, or to hug your mother on Mother's Day, or, see your children, or go to school? Nobody wants this. And you can see in the culture now, in the world, in the country, people just want things to be back the way they were, and forget the virus, pretend it's going to go away, and banish the people who are saying it's not going to go away. So that's all very understandable from a Buddhist point of view or a trauma point of view, but it's not going to get us very far. So being able to look at the collective trauma will help us deal with our individual trauma, because it's not only an individual trauma, it really is a collective trauma. And we'll be able to understand our own reactions better if we can see it as a collective thing. Then it all starts to make a little more sense.
Okay, I don't know how you're going to answer this last question. Maybe you'll just share the concern. But Orlando Nieves writes, a fear or uncertainty that I have now is, will we learn anything from this as a society? Will we, as a society, still be in this together when things finally start to feel safer again and we begin to return to our quote-unquote normal routines? I feel like it would be a massive opportunity lost if we simply go back to the old normal.
Well, my prediction is that we won't learn anything from it, based on how we've been operating over the past 100 years. But that's up to all of us. So some people will learn something, and certainly the planet is happy that we're clearing the air and not driving around and flying around and digging up at the planet's happy for a little while. So it's learning something, and maybe we can learn from that. I hope so, but I'm not too optimistic.
Okay, well, that went by rather quickly. I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions, but many thanks to our listeners for sending them in, and many thanks to you, Mark, for sharing this practice session with us today. And thank you everyone for joining us. Keep checking tricycle.org/live for upcoming session dates, to view the recordings, or to make a donation to help support this series, as well as other efforts to make Dharma accessible to all. May everyone be healthy and safe. So thank you, Mark. Any final words?
No, that's enough out of me. Thank you, James.
Thank you. So good to see you as always.
Great to see you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.